for having me, but more importantly, I want to thank so many people coming out to talk about this most important issue of the prisoners and political prisoners. I was 19 years old when I joined the Black Panther Party, started the first chapter outside of the state of California. And shortly after, the Black Panther Party began to spread across America. And we began to serve notice to the power that be that we were no longer going to take this oppression sitting down. And one of the main things that made the Black Panther Party such a target was that we understood the importance of developing broad coalition building. And that's exactly what we began to do. First with the Peace and Freedom Party out of California, and moving across the country, we created coalitions with the Young Lords, which was a Puerto Rican gang before Fred Hampton met with them and got them to turn themselves into a political organization. The Brown Berets in LA and San Diego, many other parts of California. The Young Patriot Party, which was made up of white migrants to Chicago from the Appalachians. The AIM, American Indian Movement, and we did a lot of work with Leonard Peltier in Seattle. SDS, the Weather Underground, and we also had organizations all across the world, including in Japan and South Korea and Palestine and France and Sweden and many parts of Africa. So we really became a threat to the power structure, because we understood that it really took the power of the people to change America, and that's what it's going to take today, the power of the people. Oh. So, you know, of course, our first aim when the Black Panther Party started was to stop the murder of black people in the black community. So we did exercise the Second Amendment of the Constitution that said everybody had the right to defend themselves, everybody had the right to arm themselves, and that's what we began to do. But because the Black Panther Party read a lot, we were ordered that we had to read 2 hours a day. We had to have political education class twice a week, and we understood that nothing stood outside of change, and we were always having to adapt and always had to change as an organization. So by 1969, we began to focus and develop our survival programs, because we knew we had to get the people on our side. And we had to help the people in the struggles that they were having every day. So one of the first programs that we initiated was the Free Breakfast for School Children program. So if any of you have ever gotten a free breakfast or free lunch at school, that was because of the Black Panther Party. Because we were feeding thousands and thousands of kids all across this country. One of the other significant programs that we started was developing free medical clinics, because at that time there were no community medical clinics at that time. You know, if you wanted to go see a doctor, you had to go down to the local meat house at the county and be seen. So what we did was we got doctors and we got nurses to volunteer their time. We got medical supplies donated, and we opened up 11 free medical clinics all across the country. And the one that we started in Seattle, the Carolyn Downs Free Medical Clinic, is still open to this day. So we started liberation schools. And if you've ever gone to a food bank, it was the Black Panther Party that started the food bank, the first food bank. We started giving out bags of groceries out of our office in Seattle. In Oakland, when we ran Bobby Seale for mayor, we gave out 10,000 bags of groceries with a chicken in every bag. We had free ambulance programs. We had free food programs, free clothing programs. Wherever there was a need for the people, we developed a program to serve the people. And that's when the Black Panther Party became under intense attack. In 1968, J. Edgar Hoover, John Mitchell, Richard Nixon said that the Black Panther Party was the #1 threat to the security of America. And it began to launch a tremendous assault on the Black Panther Party. By 1971, over 30 members of the Black Panther Party were killed. There were 800 members of the Black Panther Party that were arrested. Fortunately, we had a lot of great attorneys that came to our aid, and a lot of those cases they fabricated against us fell apart, and most of those people were released. But unfortunately, there were many people that never got released. And to this very day, a lot of people do not realize there are over 20 members of the Black Panther Party that are in prison. And most of them have been in prison for the last 40 years. We have Black Panther Party members that have been on solitary confinement for the last 40 years. And most recently, Herman Wallace, one of the Angola Three, was in solitary confinement for 42 years. And he just recently passed away. He was on his deathbed for almost 6 to 8 months. And we tried to get him out of prison. They refused to do it. And finally, a black judge ordered him released. And 2 days after he was released, he died. So, you know, and now we have 2.5 million people in prison. 2.5 million. I mean, that's insanity. What other country has even 1 million people in prison? And we got to go back and look at how these 2.5 million people got in prison. If there's a book called A Dark Alliance by Gary Webb, an investigative reporter, and he details how the CIA was responsible for bringing truckloads, plane loads, in any kind of conceivable way, bringing cocaine into this country to fund their war against Nicaragua Sandinistas. And they began to change the laws. They began to come up with the 3 strikes you're out. They changed the sentence guidelines. They got rid of the federal parole. They got rid of the state parole. And they, if you had rock cocaine on you, then you were subject to get 20 to 40 years in prison. And this is how we got to this point where we have so many people in prison. So, you know, we have to be real that the people that we're dealing with are unbalanced. The government that we have, the Congress, the Senate, the White House, the state senators, the people who run the prisons, the police departments, these people are not human. They're not human because they have no concept of what humanity is about. And it's going to take the people. It's going to take the people to change this because they're not going to change on their own accord. And so we are going to have to understand that we have to create unity. You know, Huey used to say, we are one. We are one. We have to understand it. We used to understand that when I was growing up. You know, in the 60s, when I grew up in the 50s and 60s, you know, we all had a cultural value system. All ethnic groups had a cultural value system. You know, we understood the importance of unity. We understood the importance of family. We understood the importance of community. And when integration came and they began to push individualism on us, you know, we didn't have a sense of individualism when I was growing up. You know, we didn't have that sense. You know, this is why we were able to come together and unite the way that we did, but individualism has been pushed upon us. And so now it's very difficult to bring people together. But as things get worse, you know, they are destroying the environment at such a rapid pace. It's just unbelievable. You know, the fracking, the building of these oil pipelines all through the country that are bursting continuously. You know, they're taking oil out of the ground in South Dakota, and they've had 150 incidents of pipelines busting, and they never told anybody. It just came to light. Now they want to build a pipeline from the tar sands in Canada all the way through the country. And the tar sands in Canada, man, that is, if you don't know about that, you need to learn about that, because that is one of the worst ecological disasters on the face of the planet. And we got to stop them in their tracks, because they're gonna try to build that pipeline, but we're gonna have to stop them from doing that, because our survival rests upon that. You know, the integrity of our children, the integrity of our youth, you know, is in our hands, you know. and these 2.5 million people in prison and the deplorable conditions that people live in. There's no other country in the world that has somebody on death row for 42 years, living in a closet for 42 freaking years. That's insanity. And that's insanity for us as a people to allow that. Of course, a great illusion has been played upon us. A tremendous illusion has been played upon us. Every time I go into a store and I see that Oprah magazine and I see her on the front cover smiling and grinning, it just makes me so angry. You know, it makes me so angry. Like everything is just so great. Everything is so wonderful. And it's not. You know, we got 25 million kids in this country that go to bed hungry every night. We're the richest country in the world, you know? So it's going to take us reaching across the lines and talking to people that we may never have thought we would have talked to before. Building coalitions with people we never would have thought before. And you will be surprised. Even those people on the right, you know, they're in the same condition that we are. You know, but they just don't, they can't see it. You know, I ran for U.S. Senate in '07 and for the state of Washington against Maria Cantwell. And I had to go across the east of the mountains where the conservative part of the state is. And I was asked by a reporter, you know, Aaron, how are you going to win those people over? And I just reflected back on my days as a Panther when we had these broad coalition building and we reached across all kinds of broad lines. And I just instinctively knew that, you know, that it could be done. And sure enough, the largest percentage of votes that I got in the state of Washington was from white conservatives. I spent a lot of time over there. I'll tell you a little story. When I was, my campaigning manager and I went to the Enum Claw Fair in the state of Washington. We were looking for somewhere to park, and I saw this big white guy with a bandana on and tattoos and big muscles and everything, and I said, okay, let's go park here. So I got out, you know, I started talking to him, I gave him my campaign information, and after about 10 minutes he said, man, you know what, I'm going to vote for you, don't tell my wife though. So we came out of the fair, and his wife, you know, a white lady was sitting in the lawn chair, and she said, mister, come here for a minute, come over here. She said, I want to get one of your lawn signs. I want to put it on my lawn. And the next thing she said was, but if you get elected, I don't want to see you driving around in a big car. And that's the same thing that somebody would say from the ghetto, from the black community, is that we want you to serve the people. And so when I heard that, and then when I heard that Obama was going to run for president, and my black friends would say, man, white people aren't going to vote for him. I knew that they would, because they are so desperate. They'll vote for anybody that's going to do something. And so, you know, I take my hat off to the brothers and sisters who are spending time in prison. And we are going to have to connect with those people that are in prison and let them know that they are not alone. Let them know that we're fighting for them. You know, a lot of them, thousands and thousands of prisoners are getting diabetes because of that horrible food that they are feeding them. And you know, they don't have a choice because all they're given is that starchy food and no fruit. So, you know, I just want to thank everybody here, and, you know, I want to end by saying all power to the people.
All power to the people.
All power to the people.
Oh, man.
Well, I think everyone will agree this was very moving and very inspiring, but I'm sure you also have some questions. So there's still a little bit more time. So if you have a question, could I ask you to just come up to the microphone so that everyone can hear the question, and then the panelists can answer.
Make the question brief.
Yes, and make your question brief.
Assalamu alaikum. The question I have is, how do we change the discourse on, you know, why people go to prison? Because typically speaking, you know, if you talk to people and they say, well, they wouldn't be in prison if they just didn't do something bad. So it's like, how do we change that? Because we know that, you know, the system is repressive, and we know that people are being sent to prison because it's a business. But how do we change that discussion?
Well, I think, you know, first of all, I mean, when you talk to someone about somebody being in prison, you know, they kind of look at you like, you know, like you're an alien, or the person that you're talking about is an alien. And so because, you know, the prisons are so far removed from the community, and the things that they're doing to the prisoners are so far removed from the community. Now, in the Black Panther Party, one of the survival programs that we started was the Free Busing to Prisons program. And we started this all across the country. And what that entailed was getting some cars, some vans, and we got some buses donated. And we started taking members from the community to visit the prisons. And in the state of California, you know, we were visiting all the prisons in the state of California. Then we started taking entertainment shows, and we started taking community from the prisons into the prisons. And so we have to create, the other thing that I forgot to mention is one of the things that we used to say in the Black Panther Party, the power is the ability to define phenomena and make it act in a desired manner. That is that we have to be able to define what the phenomena is. We can't let them define it. And over the last 30 years, they have been defining the phenomena for us. And when they define the phenomena, and we are not allowed to define phenomena, that gives them the power. So we have to be able to define it for ourselves. And we have to shed light, whether it's on talk shows, radio shows, whether it's going door to door, whether it's having community meetings like this, whether it's taking busloads of people from the community to the prison so they can see what those prisons are like, so they can see what the prisoners are living through, so they can see this for themselves. And then we have to be able to define how we change that, you know, how we can change it. And we did that through our survival program. We defined hunger, and we changed it through our breakfast programs, and we defined miseducation. We changed it through our liberation program. So, you know, there's a lot of things that we can do, but we have to be able to give the message, and we haven't been able to do that. So hopefully we can.
I would just like to add in the sense of education, because lack of education causes people to end up in places they shouldn't be. And as an example, you look at standardized tests. Prisons are built based upon the test scores of your 3rd and 5th graders. If those scores are, Billy Bob's score is bad, it's just like having his name on a cell. So we as parents, as neighbors, friends of it, we have to make sure they have a proper meal. We need to make sure that we help them study so that those test scores will be high enough so that prisons can start being built. Just recently, I found out that they cut the food stamps.
Yep.
So just think what's going to happen. A little bit more crime, because no parent, guardian want to sit back and see their child hungry. So they are going to do little things, you know, hit somebody over the head, and it's going to cost them to end up. So we've got to find another way, and as Brother said, through meetings, through passing the word on to others, we have to become more involved. I grew up in that area. So I know, I mean, we had a village. It was a neighborhood. If somebody said somebody did something, one of the worst whoopings I got was because an old lady said I did something that I didn't do. And what happened is when my dad said, yeah, she said you did, and I said she didn't, he said, well, she wouldn't lie. So, you know, because grown folks didn't lie. And I got a whooping. So what I'm saying, we do have to become responsible. We can't just, we see something in our neighborhood, and we just, oh, well, he's acting up, acting out. We need to take some part in that. And that's one of the ways, through education and just trying to get the word out. So that when we have, just like this prison reform bill, this hearing is coming up. That's kind of poor timing, in my opinion. It's right 2 days before Thanksgiving or the day before. And people may or may not show up, but they know that. they have their meetings at 10 o'clock in the morning. Who's going to take off from work to go? You know, your employer, well, I'm sorry, I can't let you go. You know, and you have to either be interested enough to say you're going to take off and go or not. And then there's sometimes repercussions. So education is one of the things that I would like to say that we need. And then one last comment from me is there's a movie, it was a documentary that aired and it's out there on YouTube. It's called The House That I Lived In.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have some time,
Mm-hmm.
and if you don't, take some time to go download that and watch it. Very, very informative.
Thank you. That was a very good question. I think we really have to take it into be serious about it. I know as it affects society is always evolving, changing. I think the movements, different movements that have been mentioned here and your presence here can affect those changes. In the teachings that we grew up in the Native American community comes from our elders. And these are some of these teachings she expressed here. They're very similar, different nationalities. We have an obligation, we have responsibilities. We have to reach out and teach our kids. And alcoholism, drugs, is affecting our community. And many of our young people are incarcerated because of that. But we have, as elders, as tribal leaders, we have a responsibility, we have an obligation to get back to the ancient teachings. Because they're very much a foundation of who we are as a human being. And unless we get back to that, then it becomes more difficult. But society continues to change. And I feel that as the five-finger people, we can affect those changes. But, thank you for that question. That's a very good question. How do we make changes in this world? How do we make changes in this society where we're going to quit, where the institutions will quit warehousing human beings? And one thing I also realized through my work, my 32 years in working with the prisons, is many of our young people who are incarcerated are very intelligent. They're a threat because they can see the difference, and they're very talented, very articulate. And it was mentioned here about the Islamic passing messages through books in the library in the prisons. One of the facility I visited, ADX in Florence, Colorado, and I was there at that time for pipe ceremonies with the Native Americans who were locked up in this 23-hour-a-day incarceration. And the FBI came in there at that time and confronted the chaplain for passing out books. And they didn't want that. They don't want books being distributed where they can read and educate themselves. And so it's one aspect of the society is they're very resistant to changes, and they do everything to suppress that. So it's a big task for all of us. And again, I want to thank you for coming here. And if you get nothing else from this presence here and listening, think about it. Think about what was said. There are reasons of the explanation given, the feelings. Ja yegoban se case. Dikoert is about hasti. The Ghana would yet it's ada. The ancient case, the mentality, the colonization, the brainwashing. It's very intense. And I said that in my language. And it's we start to think we become a threat.
I've been in the movement for 54 years now, and I worked in the Cleveland Committee, the Cleveland Committee to Combat Fascism. And I wanted to ask all of you, what, you know, if you feel hope and you see alliance building happening, genuine alliance building between different age groups and between different cultures, because in my opinion, that's the only way we're gonna stop this atrocity called the United States of America, is by building alliances, real alliances between. But we got the numbers; they just have the money. So I'd like to hear what you have to say about hope and building alliance building.
Well, I think over the last 5 years, we observed what's been happening around the world, you know, starting with the Arab Spring and many other places in Tibet and even in China. And you know, looking at South America, you know, the people in South America have achieved some great victories. In Bolivia, you have an indigenous president, Evis Morales. In Brazil, the largest country outside of South America, you had a trade union leftist organizer from the 60s who didn't even graduate from college, elected the president. And he was able to lift you know, millions of Brazilians out of poverty. And many other places in South America, there's some really wonderful things that are going on there. And as I mentioned, the Arab Spring too. And I think, you know, we could learn from them. We could learn from those examples. There's a thing called the World Social Forum. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it, but it's a gathering of activists from all over the world. They get together every year. And I had a chance to go to a couple of them in Brazil, and it's really powerful to be in an area where there are 250,000 people from all over the world that are saying the same things that we're saying, that another world is possible. And so, you know, when you think about that, when you think, because a lot of times we just think about what's going on here in this country, and we feel besieged and we don't see any hope. But there's so much hope that is taking place outside of this country, and we can learn from them. And it's just a matter of time before the people here in this country begin to connect with that and begins to spread here in this country. So there is some hope, and I do see hope.
I too see hope, and I look at it a little bit differently in the sense that when I'm inside the walls, one of the things I've talked to them about is stop fighting each other. You need to pull together in here to get things for you all as a community. This is your community, so you need to unify. So stop fighting each other and whatever movement, and come together. I use the statement, when I fight for my freedom, I'm fighting for your freedom too. Because if you don't, and I'm just by myself, I need that support, that unity. So I see hope. I see, you know, the groups coming together, the gangs, the religious groups. You know, not necessarily like in Islam, so we have various sects. So everybody want to have their little own time, and I'm like, they're not gonna give it to you. Be real. Let's be real. So come together, and then whatever little difference you have, then we have some time, we can tack that on in the end. So we need to learn to come together and unify, fight for the change for all of you all within.
Thank you.
I'm optimistic about changes happening. Perhaps maybe in our lifetime we may not see it, but some of the movements that have been mentioned earlier, the Black Panthers, the Brown Berets, the American Indian movement, they inspired movements among the indigenous people throughout the Western Hemisphere and throughout the world. I really believe that, and I've been in places, other places outside this country, and I see that they're inspired by what happens here in the belly of the beast. And they take that direction or that inspiration. So sometimes what we do here inspires other people, other nationalities, and indigenous people. And what happened in Wounded Knee in 1973 inspired a movement among our indigenous people throughout this world. So I do have hope. And again, we as elders have to inspire the younger generation by encouraging them, by talking to them, by sharing some of these stories. In 1969, I went to a conference in Oakland, California, United Front Against Fascism, that was sponsored by the Black Panthers, and that's where I met the Black Panthers. And I had not yet joined the American Indian movement, but it made me think about where do our people fit into this movement. So that is an example of how one movement inspires another peoples. So I think the sharing of information, just continue to encourage each other, and continue to visit death row, or continue to visit the prisons, and inspire those individuals who maybe are incarcerated for life, or they're in a death row, and giving hope that way. That's my feeling. I don't know if really that's what Al Cooper was asking for, but that's the way I feel, that we might not be able to see some of these changes in our lifetime. It might be our children and grandchildren that will be the beneficiaries of this movement today.
I just want to bring up one point. I don't know how I forgot this, but they recently had a prison strike in the California prison system. We're talking about white, black, brown, red prisoners all over the state got together and decided, they put out a manifesto and said, we are not going to fight each other. We're not going to kill each other any longer. And they put together a fast. And they fasted for almost, I believe it was about a month and a half or more. We're talking about like 250 prisons all over the state of California. And that was huge. And so when I saw that happen, I knew that that the most politicized people that we have in this country, and the most committed people that we have in this country, are the ones that are in prison.
Yep.
This will be the last question, just because of time. I realize that people would actually like to hear more, but we might just have to do a follow-up session or something like that. This will be the last question.
I actually don't have a question, I have a comment. And it could be a bit of a question. I just want to congratulate our sister and brothers in terms of their comments, their presentation this evening. I would want to encourage us, okay, as sisters and brothers in struggle, that in New Mexico, that we study the history of New Mexico and the political history of incarceration in New Mexico, and quite frankly, how incarceration has been a political tool of those that have been oppressing us and at the same time are oppressing us today. There's a lot of similarities between incarceration, assassination, and several other venues that those that are in charge have used in this state. So I want to commend you. I don't want to go on. I know it's been a long day, but I want to encourage you to understand, to make a commitment to study the history of New Mexico. And if we do that, then we can see together as sisters and brothers how then what's being talked about here was used against us then and is being used against us now.
500 years in Chicano history.
Just to correct a moment of history. No?
500 years of history.
It was actually in New Mexico, the Black Berets, the Brown Berets, the American Indian Movement, the Black Panthers, and there were several other organizations in concert with the Young Lords at the Crusade for Justice at the conference in Denver, Colorado, where we all came together to develop strategies and work together and so on. I would just highly encourage you to study the history. I would be cautioned that as New Mexico, as a military colony of the United States, that we don't colonize our own selves in the process of doing that. Let's not forget the Chicano movement. Let's not forget what's taking place in this city, in this state. Let's not forget those that were assassinated by the Albuquerque Police Department in the 60s and the 70s. Let's not forget that those that are being assassinated by the Albuquerque Police Department today, as we're in this room, we could go on and on and on. Mexicanos, Chicanos, Native Americans, African Americans, and others. So I just encourage you, sisters and brothers, to not ourselves to be colonized. And don't forget the brown people that helped to build this city and this state at the same time as we begin to uncolonize our brains, our mentalities, and our bodies. So I would encourage you to study the Chicano movement as we do that, and not forget those that make it possible for us to be in this room this evening to have this discussion. So thank you to the three panelists and to our officers.
Thank you, bro.
Thank you for having us.
And thanks for having us, and let's move this struggle forward.